The television series Ancient Aliens has been airing for 21 seasons now and counting. Inspired by the books of pseudo-historians like Eric von Daniken and Zecharia Sitchin, it misleads millions of viewers each year with its sensationalized conspiracy theories about ancient civilizations around the world. The entire show is based on the unfounded claim that extraterrestrial astronauts visited Earth thousands of years ago and influenced the development of prehistoric human society. That TV show and the presenters they feature often claim that the ancient Sumerians knew all about these aliens and referred to them as the Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
The Sumerian mythology of the Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
Some of them try to bring the Bible into the picture as well, peddling wild theories that involve demons and an ancient race of beings called the Nephilim. As you can imagine, those presenters are experts on neither Sumerian mythology nor the Bible. We've done our own deep dive on the Nephilim and their story. It's a fascinating biblical legend about ancient semi-divine warriors that borrows heavily from the myths of Israel's ancient neighbors. However, we've never done a proper video discussing the Anunnaki before. This group of gods played an important role in much of the early Sumerian and Akkadian literature that shaped the religions of the Near East, Israel included. While the Bible never mentions them by name, echoes of the Anunnaki legend can still be detected here and there within the Jewish and Christian scriptures. It's time to take a closer look at what Sumerian and Akkadian mythology actually said about the Anunnaki, and whether these myths left behind any traces in the much later text of the Hebrew Bible. One of the most important gods of ancient Sumer was a deity called An. An was a divine personification of the sky, and his name simply means sky in Sumerian. An was so fundamental to the very concept of godhood that the cuneiform symbol for his name was used as an unpronounced prefix for all other deity names. An, or Anu, as he was called in Akkadian, was not often directly worshipped. Early on, the gods Enlil and Enki had a much more active role in daily religion and in the mythical stories that people told about gods. Later, national gods like Ashur and Marduk rose in prominence, but An was always there in the background. Moreover, many of the gods were considered to be the offspring or children of An. These included a group of sky deities called the Enūma, or the Anunnaki, who are often described as the great gods. For consistency, I'll refer to them simply as the Anunnaki throughout this video. Although the Anunnaki were not prominent objects of worship or devotion, they were a fixture of the Sumerian cosmic order. They were part of Anu's divine council, and in primordial times, they were the elder gods who resided on the sacred mountain of heaven and earth, a place called Duku. Some traditions, such as one preserved in the Epic of Gilgamesh, locate this mountain in the region of Lebanon, and it is called the secret dwelling of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were also anonymous. None of them had individual names as far as we know. Their number could vary. In early sources, there were often 50 of them. According to Sumerian experts, the name Enūma or Anunnaki probably means those of princely blood. It does not mean those who came from the sky, as is often claimed by ancient alien theorists. Here is a story you've probably heard, but you might not have known it involved the Anunnaki. The Akkadian epic of Atrahasis begins with the creation of the cosmos. As part of the creative process, the gods are divided into several groups. The higher gods, the Anunnaki, participate in the creation of the cosmos, and afterward they get to live in heaven in their palaces, while the lower gods, the Igigu, have to carry out mundane tasks on earth, like digging the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. After 2,500 years of this arrangement, the Igigu have had enough. They decide to rebel, and after burning their hoes and spades, they surround the palace of the god Enlil. With civil war about to break out, Anu's divine council assembles and decides that Mami, the mother goddess, should create a new kind of creature to relieve the workload of the Igigu. To create this creature, the gods sacrifice one of their own, a deity named Ilawela. Mami takes his blood and mixes it with clay to the sound of drums. Then the Anunnaki and the Igigu spit upon the clay. After an incantation is recited, Mami pinches off 14 pieces of clay, and they come alive as human beings. This tale has some obvious parallels in the story of creation found in Genesis. For example, the fact that Yahweh is accompanied and assisted by an assembly of other gods is made clear by his use of the plural during creation. Let us create man in our image. The other gods to whom Yahweh speaks are like the Anunnaki of the Akkadian myth, an anonymous group of deities who are not supposed to be worshipped, but are nevertheless present with Yahweh in heaven. In Genesis, the first human is created by taking dirt or clay and mixing it with Yahweh's breath. One commonality we see with creations of humans in the Atrahasis is the need for some essence of the gods in order to bring the dirt or clay to life. Divine blood and spittle in Atrahasis, divine breath in Genesis. The first human is then placed in the Garden of Eden to till the soil, a task of manual labor that the gods would have to do if the human wasn't there. In fact, like in Atrahasis, the purpose of man's creation in Genesis seems to be to perform agricultural labor on behalf of the gods. The Anunnaki are frequently mentioned in another ancient text called Enki and the World Order. As the title suggests, the primary focus of this text is Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom. Specifically, it describes the process by which Enki organizes and manages the world. This includes establishing the courses of the rivers and the sea, causing the rain, irrigating and tending to crops, constructing the cities, and overseeing the animals and other natural resources of the land. Enki then entrusts the responsibility for various aspects of his creation to the various gods. While Enki is doing all this, the Anunnaki sing the praises of Enki and his power. Lastly, Enki allots building plots within the cities and fields in the countryside for the use of the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki are given the job of determining the fates of the people of Sumer. The idea of this complex religious text seems to be that as long as the land of Sumer is properly organized in accordance with Enki's wishes, the Anunnaki will dwell among the people and bring joy and prosperity to the land. Here again, the Anunnaki are an anonymous group of gods who are given some level of dominion over Sumerian society, including the ability to control prosperity and fate. This time, however, they seem to inhabit the earth rather than heaven. There are no close parallels here with any deity or group of deities in the Bible. Another early Sumerian text records that the Anunnaki were installed in the temple of Ningirsu at Lagash in order to prolong the life of the pious who venerated them. Here too, we see that the well-being of Sumerian society relied on the Anunnaki inhabiting the earth and receiving the respect and piety that was due to them. Another text from Neo-Assyrian times states that he who fears the Anunnaki extends his days. Some Sumerian and Akkadian myths present an alternative view of the Anunnaki. In these texts, there are exactly 7 Anunnaki gods, and they live not in heaven or earth, but down below in the netherworld, where they act as judges. This version of the Anunnaki was also borrowed into Hurrian and Hittite mythology, where they became deities of the netherworld. The most significant myth featuring the Anunnaki as judges is a Sumerian story called the Descent of Inanna into the Underworld, and its later Akkadian version, the Descent of Ishtar into the Underworld. In this story, Inanna, the Queen of Heaven and the central goddess of Mesopotamia, goes on a journey into the netherworld to seek out and overthrow Ereshkigal, the ruler of the netherworld, who also happens to be Inanna's sister. Before setting out, Inanna instructs her assistant Ninshubar that if she does not return after 3 days and 3 nights, Ninshubar must alert the other gods and seek help. Then, equipped with her 7 powers and 7 special articles of clothing, Inanna descends into the netherworld. To reach Ereshkigal, she must pass through 7 gates and give up an article of clothing each time. By the time she reaches Ereshkigal, she is fully unclothed. Ereshkigal summons the 7 Anunnaki, and after considering Inanna's actions, they condemn her to remain in the netherworld. Inanna is then killed and hung up on a peg or a crossbeam. When Inanna fails to return to heaven, Ninshubar seeks out the gods to bring her back. The chief god Enlil refuses, but Enki in his wisdom understands the situation and devises a strategy to get Inanna back. This involves the creation of 2 special emissaries from dirt who are given the food of life and the drink of life. They travel into the underworld, meet with Ereshkigal, and request the corpse of Inanna. Using the food of life and drink of life, they bring Inanna's corpse back to life. Once again, however, the Anunnaki judges are a hindrance, for those who enter the underworld are never allowed to return to the land of the living. They offer a compromise, however. Inanna will be permitted to return if she offers a substitute to take her place, returning to Earth accompanied by 7 netherworld guardians called Galu demons. She leads them to her husband Dumuzi, who will take her place. Although our copies of this text are incomplete and difficult to understand at points, the story ends with Dumuzi and his sister, Geshtiana, sharing the burden of Inanna's judgment. Dumuzi will spend half the year in the underworld, and Geshtiana will switch places with him for the other half. The story of Inanna's descent is a complex myth that combines several independent myths, offering insights on the Mesopotamian understanding of death and the cyclicality of the seasons and the fertility of the land. Through this myth, Dumuzi became the prototypical dying and rising deity of the Near East. Inanna's descent has several connections with the Hebrew Bible. Ezekiel 8 describes a vision in which women sit by the north gate of the temple weeping for Tammuz. Tammuz was the Hebrew name for Dumuzi, and a cult existed throughout the Near East that involved weeping to commemorate the annual death of Dumuzi as a fertility ritual. This ritual took place during the 4th month of the year, which was also called Tammuz. Additionally, the motif of the 3 days and 3 nights, the length it takes to visit the underworld and the descent of Inanna, might lie behind several biblical passages that associate 3 days and nights with death and resurrection, including the prophet Jonah being inside a fish for 3 days and nights after sinking to the gates of Sheol, and of course, the resurrection of Jesus, that is to take place after 3 days and nights according to Matthew 12:40 and 16:21. The tradition of the Anunnaki as judges of the netherworld has no analogy in the Bible. Furthermore, the Anunnaki judges do not judge the dead for their moral actions. They simply pronounce the judgment of death on those who arrive in the netherworld. However, there is a related tradition in which the Anunnaki, rather than being judges of the netherworld, are imprisoned in the netherworld by the god Marduk. This myth might be linked in some way to the imprisonment of the Titans in Tartarus in Greek mythology, and the imprisonment of the fallen watchers in Enochic Judaism. These Anunnaki who are imprisoned are 600 in number, And the word Anunnaki in this context could be written with the Akkadian logogram for 600, preceded by the god determinative. Bible scholar Robin Baker believes that the references to the number 600 and its multiples in the book of Judges have a subtext of death due to the association between 600 and the Anunnaki. Another ancient Sumerian text in which the Anunnaki appear is a creation myth called The Debate Between Grain and Sheep. The story opens with An creating the Anunnaki at the sacred mountain of heaven and earth in primordial times. At this point in creation, people already exist, but there is no grain and no sheep for food and clothing. So they go about naked eating grass with their mouths and water from ditches. The Anunnaki gods then create the grain and sheep and give them to humankind for sustenance. What follows is a long debate between the grain and sheep about which of them is superior to the other. Grain claims to be favored by the god Enlil, while sheep claims to be a gift from An. The grain claims to foster friendliness, while sheep boast of providing leather for water skins and sandals, and wool for clothing worn by kings and priests. Grain brags about the beer he produces for banquets and the envy with which shepherds eye his fields. So on and so on it goes, until Enki speaks up and declares that while grain and sheep should be sisters, grain shall be the greater of the two. Enki says, "Whoever has silver, whoever has jewels, whoever has cattle, whoever has sheep shall take a seat at the gate of whoever has grain, and pass his time there." The Anunnaki in this story once again correspond loosely with the divine counsel of Yahweh in the Bible. A more interesting connection that does not directly concern the Anunnaki is found in the competition between the grain and the sheep. According to the late Assyriologist Samuel Noah Kramer, this controversy between agricultural and animal husbandry is the closest known parallel to the biblical story of Cain and Abel. The endings, of course, are different. The Cain and Abel story ends with violence, while the debate between grain and sheep ends in reconciliation. And in the biblical version, it is the shepherd whom Yahweh prefers, in contrast to Enki, who prefers the grain. Although I won't go into much detail here, there is another Sumerian agricultural myth called Inanna prefers the farmer, in which the sun god Utu asks the goddess Inanna whether she prefers shepherds or farmers. Inanna voices her preference for farmers, but then the shepherd god Dumuzi and farmer god Enki present their sides of the debate. In the end, it seems to be Dumuzi and his pro-shepherd arguments that prevail. One other major reference to the Anunnaki is found in the Babylonian creation epic known as the Enūma Eliš. In this myth, the god Marduk is called upon to defend the gods against the sea monster Tiamat. After he defeats her and her army of monsters, he uses half of Tiamat's body to create the sky and the other half to create the earth, holding back the cosmic waters of heaven and the underworld. Then his father Ea mixes the blood of one of the gods with dirt to create humans. The function of the humans is to relieve the gods of their labor, much like in Atrahasis. After that, Marduk divides up the 600 Anunnaki, assigning 300 of them to heaven and 300 of them to the earth. Out of gratitude for relieving them of their labor, the Anunnaki build the city of Babylon for Marduk, including Marduk's temple and the great ziggurat. As with Atrahasis, the creation of humans from dirt is echoed by the Genesis story, and Marduk's conquest over Tiamat has parallels in many of the passages in which Yahweh vanquishes the sea monster, Leviathan, in order to create the world. The building of Babylon and its ziggurat by the Anunnaki as the first city is analogous to the building of Babel and its tower in Genesis chapter 11. But in the biblical story, it is clearly men and not gods who build the city. The name Anunnaki would be unknown to the general public were it not for a journalist named Zecharia Sitchin, who from the 1970s onward wrote a series of popular books about the ancient Sumerians that combined pseudo-history with science fiction. Just a few years earlier, in 1968, another pseudo-historian named Erich von Daniken had published a book called Chariots of the Gods, in which he argued that extraterrestrials had visited Earth and influenced early human culture. Sitchin, whose main interest lay in Sumerian archaeology, expanded upon von Daniken's claims and argued that the Anunnaki mentioned in Sumerian text had actually been aliens from an undiscovered planet orbiting the sun. These aliens had arrived on Earth 450,000 years ago looking for gold. And they had genetically engineered human beings to perform manual labor on their behalf. Sitchin also attempted to utilize the Bible as evidence for these events by claiming that the Anunnaki were the same as the Nephilim in Genesis 6. Not long ago, we did a separate video all about the Nephilim, so we won't go into detail here. Essentially, the ancient Hebrews had borrowed myths from their Near Eastern neighbors about ancient warriors who had been the offspring of gods and human women. The Bible calls these ancient warriors the Nephilim, which means fallen ones, most likely because they had fallen in battle long ago. It's important to stress that the Nephilim certainly cannot be equated with the Sumerian Anunnaki in any way. The only connection between these two myths is the fact that the Anunnaki fill a similar role in Sumerian mythology to the Divine Council of the Bible. And it is the Divine Council whose members fathered the Nephilim in Genesis 6. Even then, the Anunnaki differ from the biblical Divine Council in several ways. Owing to the incredible popularity of Sitchin's books, misinformation about ancient Sumerian civilization and mythology is rampant today. Although there is zero archaeological evidence for any of Sitchin's claims, and his translations of Sumerian text are utterly ridden with errors and falsehoods, the idea of Anunnaki as ancient aliens who visited Earth has firmly taken root among many people with a passing interest in ancient history and conspiracy theories. The Ancient Aliens TV series, which launched in 2009 on the History Channel, has greatly expanded the audience for Sitchin's fantasies and has fostered a new generation of pseudo-historians and pseudo-archaeologists, each with their own variation of the Ancient Aliens conspiracy theory. Most of these people accept without question Sitchin's efforts to equate the Nephilim and the Anunnaki. In the process, they have poisoned and misled millions of people about not only archaeology and Sumerian mythology, but the Bible as well. I hope you stick around as we continue to explore the stories and myths found in the Bible and other Near Eastern literature. The truth is interesting enough on its own without having to make up sensationalist lies about aliens from secret planets or conspiracy theories about ancient genetic experiments. Our knowledge about the ancient world comes from the tireless work of extraordinarily skilled and passionate historians and archaeologists who are constantly excavating, analyzing, and deciphering ancient artifacts to increase our knowledge about the lives and beliefs of ancient humans. And we here will continue to bring you that knowledge at MythVision. Please like the video, comment your thoughts down below, share this video out far and wide, and consider joining our Patreon. We can use your support. Again, thank you, Paul Davidson, for editing this video. Be sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel. Link is in the description.